Thanks very much. Of course, as I was saying before, I'm going to be in conversation now with Dan Peter Al-Nadaf. He is from the Budget Justice Coalition and he's also a legal researcher. Thanks very much for joining us, young man. Of course, you're very focused on the social issues and what government does to ensure that it takes care of society. What is it that you're hoping that the Finance Minister is going to speak to today?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one of the first things we're hoping for is that the Minister will finally acknowledge openly that decades of austerity budgeting haven't worked, and to call it by its name. I think people are tired of knowing that when the Minister says fiscal consolidation, what they really mean is less money coming into people's pockets every year. We hope that the Minister acknowledges the importance of social protection not only as a constitutional and a moral imperative, but as an economic engine. And so as a result, we're hoping that we have ring-fenced funding for social protection, for child costs and for nutrition. And we also hope that the Minister finally commits to considering more progressive revenue-raising mechanisms than the current ones that the Treasury is making use of.
Speaking to the points that you've spoken to, as a legal researcher, someone who has really studied this thing and looked at data and is not just emotional about, oh, we need to help everybody type thing, what if in the ideal world that sort of support was made available? What would the South African economy look like in the longer term, particularly from a productive, competitive point of view?
I really love that question because I think often we're talking, and it is important, about the moral reasons why we need to take care of people. But economically, what we know is that investment in social well-being and social protection has one of the highest multiplier effects on economic growth, particularly things like early childhood development, like nutrition and like healthcare. What that does is it not only makes our population more equipped to participate in the economy, but it also means that the state then doesn't have to bear costs later on for the fallout of not nourishing children. So we don't have to pay for the cost of stunting, for violence that exists in society, for corruption and state incompetence, all of which occur as a result of stripping out our state infrastructure. And so as an economy, what that would look like is not only an economy that's more productive in the formal and informal sector, but one which is able to take care of itself. And so when we speak about having, a dependent population, the only way we assist people to be able to produce things for themselves is to stimulate the economy by protecting them in the first place.
What do you say to the argument that if we were to go whole hog in, say, for example, maximizing the SRD, maybe transforming it into a basic income grant, it would take quite a bit away from the fiscus, and therefore there wouldn't be enough to then invest in areas like infrastructure. For various reasons, we have crumbling infrastructure, especially in terms of water. We've got potholes, etc., etc. Our local municipalities are not working. There are a lot of issues that are conspiring together to put us on the back foot. So what would you say to that argument? Because it's a very tricky line to try and walk when there's so many prerogatives that you need to address.
Yeah, so we hear that question and that argument a lot, and we have to interrogate the premise of that argument, which is that we are already on the edge of a fiscal cliff and that the only money that Treasury has made available is the only money we'll ever get. The reality is that austerity is imposed. It's an ideological position taken by Treasury, and we have at our disposal revenue-raising mechanisms like drawing down on the JFECRA account, like more progressive taxation mechanisms to tax the wealthy in a way that really is not done in this country. And so the reality is that it's in Treasury's interest to have different rights being pitted against each other and us all fighting for the crumbs, rather than asking Treasury why the pie is so small to begin with. And so what we know is that paying for investment in this country's people doesn't have to come at the expense of paying for infrastructure. But what that requires is a bold commitment by Treasury to actually explore how to tax the portions of the population that have been able to store away wealth for a very long time without consequence.
And what do you say to the argument about if we tax the wealthier even more, we face the risk of capital flight?
To be honest, this has been studied before by organizations much smarter than myself, like the Institute for Economic Justice. The reality is that the wealthier segment of our population, which is where the wealth tax would be focused. Most people who think they would be affected by a wealth tax would not be affected by a wealth tax. Those sections of the population are not operating anywhere near their margins of utility at the moment. And so the ability to tax them more would not create nearly enough harm towards them, frankly speaking, for them to consider moving jurisdictions. They would still have much more positive business setups in this country, and they would still have much more positive returns on their investments without being allowed to hoard the level of wealth that they currently are.
Okay, we wait and see. Thank you so much for that. That was Dan Peter Al-Nadaf. He's on the steering committee of the Budget Justice Coalition, and he's also a legal researcher. And of course, he's touched on the issue of tax. And what the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, had said in the midterm budget policy statement in November was that they were penciling in the possibility of raising taxes by 20 billion rand in this national budget. But that would be only if they got word from SARS that SARS was collecting more than anticipated and was able to collect debt that's owed to it, debt that's already owed to it, to the tune of about 50 billion rand. That's what they were aiming for. So we have to wait and see whether SARS managed to accomplish that. But over and above that, we do know that the fiscus has had quite a boon, given that we've had really good growth on gold assets, PGMs, and the Johannesburg stock market has been going through the roof. So all of these things, even though they're just a windfall, a once-off boon, they may help to lift up the coffers, and therefore maybe we won't be burdened with so much tax. But your usual sin taxes and likely your fuel levy, well, people say they think that those will go up, but we wait and see. Of course, we continue with this rolling coverage on the budget 2026, and we pass it over to studio.
Right. Thank you very much, my colleague Nompumelelo Siziba there, giving you a build-up to the 2026 budget speech as Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana prepares to address the nation this afternoon. Major talking points coming up as the budget is set to address the many pressing socio-economic challenges facing South Africans. We know that out in the streets of Cape Town, COSATU has come out in their numbers, also wanting to hear what the budget will present, talking about listening out for zero increases and in so far as tax goes.